Have you ever wondered what makes a computer run? What kinds of parts are within these sophisticated machines? Well, today I'll be showing you the different parts of a computer and tell you about the functions in a way that all people can understand. First, we will take a look at a desktop computer, take a look on the insides and the parts, then take a look at the way that a computer works so you can get to playing your favorite game, search on Google, and even watching this video right now. Hello, I'm Luc Peralta, and this is a lecture on computer hardware and software brought to you by the STEM Outreach Initiative. Firstly, before we take a look inside of a computer, let's define our two most important terms. Hardware is any computer part that you can touch or see within the physical computer. And an analogy that will be used all video will be the human body to the parts of the computer. In terms of the computer to the human body, hardware in this case would be our body parts. Software, however, is a set of programs or data that is used for computers to work. Software would be comparable to the things that our body tells us to do. Now that we know our two very important words, let's dive in. This is a desktop. And now that we have our desktop, let's open it up. Firstly, in this video, we will be starting off with our hardware. But before we get into our individual components like this over here or this, we have to find out where they are all connected. And I'm not sure if you can see, but if we remove all of our parts, as you can see a little bit over here, we have what is called the motherboard. And the function of the motherboard is to create connections between the components to allow the proper running of a computer. The motherboard is also connected to the power supply, which supplies power to all components and the whole motherboard. The motherboard, in comparison to the human body, can be thought of as the nervous system, as the nervous system is a huge system that includes nerves that connect to the brain in order to make sure that we give a response to anything that startles us. Speaking of the nervous system, however, arguably the most important part of a computer system is the central processing unit, or CPU for short. Let's go find that. There is your CPU. Now this is a CPU. The CPU is a very important part of the system because simply if there wasn't no CPU, the computer would never work. This is because the CPU does the calculations that no other part in the computer system does in order to help it run. And the CPU does this by retaining information from inputs like your keyboard or mouse and interprets them, performs calculations, and sends information and instructions out for output. The CPU is also like the brain in terms of the fact that it performs calculations. However, since the CPU is so important, let's break it down into several parts. But like quite literally not break this down because these can get expensive. Like really expensive. Anyways, CPUs are made up of things called cores. In most CPUs, they will usually have more than one core in the new ones. However, it is possible to buy a one-core CPU as those are relatively older. In a second though, I will show you why if buying CPUs you should always get a good amount of cores. In these cores, they contain an arithmetic logic unit, ALU in short. The ALU solves math and logic operations with binary data, or zeros and ones. A core also has memory, known as caches. For every CPU they have 3 caches, with L1 being the fastest and L3 being the slowest. The L1 and L2 caches are based in every core, while the L3 cache is shared amongst all cores. However, L1 may be the fastest, but it also has the least amount of space to store data. One reason why CPUs go faster is because they have larger caches, meaning they can receive data faster than having to receive data from the primary memory. And speaking of primary memory, we will be talking about RAM and read-only memory. also known as ROM. Firstly, let's go over random access memory, or RAM for short. This is a RAM stick. RAM is the primary memory in a computer. This is because it receives information from any inputs within the system first, then temporarily stores the data, and then it would be sent into the CPU. This process would cycle over and over again until you turn the computer off, where the data gets wiped. In terms of the human body, it can be your short-term memory that you may have. There is honestly no other better way to put it than that. However, with read-only memory, or ROM, it is non-volatile, meaning that it cannot be changed. The reason why it is called ROM is because it doesn't write anything new to the memory, only the computer reads it. This is because ROM is the memory that sets up how the computer responds to certain data or commands. In comparison to the human body, ROM would be your instincts. And this is a DVD-ROM drive, also known as a CD drive. And this basically, you can put a CD into it, and the computer only reads the things from here, but it doesn't write anything new to the CD. Also, keep in mind that both of these types of memories are the primary memory within the system. Secondary memory, however, are your digital drives. And digital drives can be thought of as your long-term memory because they store information forever. Anyhow, there are two different types of digital drives. You have your hard drives, or HDDs, and solid state drives, or SSDs. Hard drives in general have been a lot less common nowadays because of the SSD. However, hard drives were the dominant storage type back then. In order to visualize how big hard drives are, this is a 500 gigabyte hard drive. And the way that hard drives write data is through mechanic work, and it is done with using magnetic disks, also known as platters, and they write data on there by mechanical movement. But in turn of this, the read and write speeds are much lower compared to SSDs because they are limited by how fast the mechanic work is able to be done. And in turn, they can only write about like 350 megabytes per second on the higher end. However, in terms of high storage hard drives, they are much cheaper and much easier to find than solid state drives with high capacity. Now, this is a SSD. SSDs are a lot more common nowadays due to its compactness and performance. And since there are so many form factors, which include 2.5 inch SATA, mini SATA, and M.2, with M.2 being the most popular and normally the most fastest with PCIe and interface for SSDs. SSDs work by using interconnected flash memory that is used to represent data in the form of binary, again, your zeros and ones. Because of this being electric and not mechanical writing, it is a lot faster, as we know that electricity travels very fast in comparison to mechanical systems. However, because of the performance and compactness of a SSD, they are in higher demand, thus increasing the price of many SSDs. Next up is a very important component for people who want to game, who want to edit and watch videos, or people who want to do things on high resolution monitors. Now, this is a graphics card, also known as a video card or GPU. This also is a GPU, which is significantly bigger, made much later in time, and with a GPU, it allows the computer to interpret graphical data in order to then send it to the display. This is the same reason why if you take a look at another computer that has an individual graphics card, the monitor is connected there rather than to the motherboard. This is because when you connect it to the GPU, you get the data output directly from there. But if you connect it to the motherboard, you get data from the CPU's integrated graphics, which it most likely has nowadays. It is important to note that connections to input wouldn't be possible without things like ports on this computer. Now, there are many different types of ports, and these include VGA, HDMI, audio jack, and most importantly, your USB ports. And these ports are important in the computer because how would you tell the computer what to do if you can't give it input. And though this may not be the case for any electronics like a tablet or laptop that have integrated screens and keyboards or touchscreens, for a tower computer like this, you cannot give any input other than on or off. And in terms of the human body, there's a lot of things to analogize ports with. Now, we will be moving on to the computer itself, and we will be talking about software on there through screen recording. Now, software, as we said, is a set of programs and data that allow a computer to run. And since we spent so much time over our hardware, we will be talking about the two most important pieces of software: your operating system and BIOS. As we can see here, we have our operating system loaded up. It is also known as an OS, and basically what an OS is, it is system software that manages our computer hardware and other software resources in order to provide common services for computer programs. And this does so by allocating resources to all of the different components in a computer, meaning our hardware and also our certain software and firmware, which we will get on later on. And OSs, they provide an interface or system of interaction between the computer and us. So as example, as I just opened this by using Windows key, you can see there's these things called GUIs or graphical user interfaces. And basically what you can do, you can click on them, you can close them, and these start processes. And also you can search up on your computer, you can search up a command prompt. This is also CLI. You could use, this was basically what people used as interfaces back then. This is a CLI or a command line interface, and you would have to type in the destination. And yeah, if you do that, then obviously you don't get that. But basically that is what a CLI is. CLIs were more used back in the older days where OSs were much newer. Now, in terms of our human body, the OS can be comparable to our central nervous system or your spinal cord in your brain. However, it's important to keep in mind that it isn't completely like the brain. As we said, the CPU is more of the brain than the OS. However, let's move on to BIOS, or your basic input-output system. BIOS is actually a different type of software called firmware. And this means that I can control individual functions of components rather than larger processes. So, whereas the OS is more high level, your BIOS is more low level because it covers individual functions. And BIOS is really important to our computer because it is a part of the computer that tests components. It checks that everything works and is in good condition, as well as little things like making sure the time is correct. And BIOS does this all at startup. And if you see in your computer screen when you start your computer up, in the top right corner it says like press this certain key for BIOS setup. That basically allows you to change your settings within the BIOS. And in terms of our body, BIOS is kind of like a defibrillator or life support rather than something in our human body. This is because this is the part of the computer, rather firmware, that starts up everything and makes sure that everything is working properly. However, whatever we may say about computers, we can all agree that it is truly one of the most important pieces of technology ever. The fact that all these components are able to work together and to make something so important in today's world is something that's truly mind-blowing. Compared to 50 years ago, we have definitely gotten way farther. And we're not even done upgrading our computer components, as they've just been getting better and better. For example, we are now integrating AI into our computer chips. We have CPUs with more than 100 cores and able to handle more than the highest capacity RAM sticks times 8. It is truly stunning how beautiful these machines are. But unfortunately, that is the end of our time here today. I am Luc Peralta, and I will be glad to share you another one of these STEM Outreach Initiative video lectures with you soon. Thank you.